Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Source Incarnate YouTube channel. Today, we're diving into something truly powerful, the story of Russell Brand's journey to faith in Jesus. He recently sat down with Wes Huff on the Apologetics Canada channel and shared a deeply personal account of what brought him to this point. I was particularly struck by a specific section of the interview, and I knew I had to share it with you all. It's a story of transformation, struggle, and ultimately the undeniable grace of God. We'll watch a clip of that conversation, and then I'll share some of my reflections and what I think we can all take away from it. So, let's jump in.
So for you, Russell, when did it become about Jesus? And I'm talking like specifically, how did you hear about Jesus, or when did I know you said through the 10 steps you found, I know they often talk about God in the 10 steps, of course, but like, what about like Jesus? Like, who introduced you to Jesus?
Well, in a way, Jesus needs no prior introduction. I mean, Jesus as a sort of a figure in the culture is very, very present, even if you live in a secularized sort of, gosh, what do you call Britain? Sort of a collapsed empire trying to revivify itself with the sort of the offal and entrails of collapsing, imploding globalism. Even there, you've got churches, even there you've got people talking about Jesus, but it's, as I say, kind of banalized. And because I was a kid that was doing things like taking hallucinogens, I was sort of aware of this sort of psychedelic Christ. And indeed, it's almost this somewhat psychedelic Christ to whom I've been reintroduced when I think of this collapsing wave particle Christ, this immanent, transcendent Christ. Like, there's things in there that are impossible for me to hold in my mind. And if I could hold them in my mind, then I wouldn't have yielded and broken.
All right, wow, let's unpack that for a bit because it's already getting pretty dense. And I think this is a very important point. Russell's experience with this psychedelic Christ is fascinating. It speaks to a yearning for something beyond the mundane, a search for the divine. But it also highlights the potential pitfalls of relying on external sources, like substances, for spiritual connection. As Dr. David R. Hawkins suggests, there may be a karmic debt associated with such shortcuts. True connection, true transcendence, may require a deeper, more internal journey. What Russell describes, this elusive, almost unattainable experience, seems to reflect the challenges of seeking fulfillment outside of oneself. It's a reminder that the spiritual path is often complex and winding, and that true connection may require more than just fleeting glimpses of the divine. It also raises questions about the role of psychedelics in our society. While they can offer profound experiences, they're not without risks. The ancients understood the power of these substances and treated them with reverence. Perhaps we need to rediscover that reverence and approach these experiences with greater caution and respect. All right, I'm going to do my best not to pause too much because I don't want to interrupt Russell's flow. Let's keep watching.
Yielded and broken. In terms of the coming to Jesus more latterly, of like recognizing, oh no, you're a Christian, you're going to follow Jesus Christ. That happened because simultaneously, I mean, it's impossible to divorce it from these events. Simultaneously, in my country, after entering into, it seemed to me at least, a new space, talking online about a lot of controversial subjects, whether that's the origins of war or the nature of the pandemic and the kind of claims that were being made during the pandemic and who benefited as a result of those claims, whether it was sort of global institutions, pharmaceutical, corporate, commercial institutions, or regulatory state institutions that suddenly were granted the ability to have this almost unfeasible and ridiculous power. I talked about that stuff a lot. I was starting to sort of move in a kind of different direction. I didn't sort of define myself as a kind of a populist, or as they say in this culture, kind of a red pill person, i.e. I believe in like the folks that flow forth from the belly of Joe Rogan, with all, much as I love Joe Rogan. No, I felt like there's something else in here. And I've come to this as a drug addict in recovery. So when I get, and I'd also become disillusioned with fame a lot of times. You get a lot of chances to become disillusioned with it. It's a pretty paltry offering, really. I think that when I see, say, Kanye West turn up with his nude and exemplary partner at the Grammys, I think, what is this citadel? What is this carnival that in which you long took part? What are its values? What does it mean? What's it trying to tell us by its fruits? Shall we know it? I'd grown tired of that some time ago. I was living a pretty, like, I'm married, I have 3 children, and I'm kind of understanding domesticity without really, if I can say, too much grounding in that area or too much appreciation experientially of what functional domesticity might be like. And trying to work out where I'm going to go in life. And then suddenly I'm deluged first with wave after wave of attack of you're a conspiracy theorist, then very sort of what seemed to me very particular, bespoke and constructed attacks based on historic sexual behavior. And what I must confess to is having created a lot of raw material when it came to my promiscuity and my consumption. Nevertheless, from this emerged untrue allegations of sexual impropriety, which forced me to recognize that the 2 things I'd been in practice worshipping, fame and sex, and I mean in practice because that's what I was spending my time doing, was trying to be famous and trying to have sex a bunch, that these 2 idols turned like serpents and became the vehicles of not my destruction, but the destruction of the previous identity and idol that I'd worshipped, Russell Brand, famous person. As if to sort of provide some ludicrous yet magical stone altar on which to place this offering. My beautiful son was born with a condition called tetralogy of Fallot, a diagnosis we received when my wife was 26 weeks into her pregnancy, and we were, of course, like all parents at that stage, offered termination.
Oh my goodness. I don't care how rich or famous you are. None of that matters when faced with such a gut-wrenching experience. Talk about getting humbled.
Weeks into her pregnancy, and we were, of course, like all parents at that stage, offered termination. And this simultaneous shocks of learning that we were going to have a baby and that it was going to be challenging and going through that experience together, I mean, my wife Laura and I, while there was this external cacophony that seemed so dreadful and so awful because of the nature of the allegations, the truly awful nature of the allegations, because it was partnered with this vivid and real experience of Great Ormond Street Hospital, open heart surgery of a 12-week-old baby, the conversation where surgeons and anaesthetists tell you, you are aware of the risks. You are aware of the risks. My wife lactating after he's been handed over to the anaesthetist because, of course, like anyone before surgery, a 12-week-old baby can't eat for hours before the surgery. So vivid, so corporeal, so powerful that all of my systems, the systems I had, couldn't contain it or hold it. And in the midst of the sort of wreckage of it all and the bewilderment and the wilderness, in the wilderness of it all, the voices that I identify and locate are like people I know personally that are Christian, but that weren't particularly relevant somehow up until that point. And then some actual pretty prevalent Christians out of the culture emerge. And firstly, just with gentle compassion and openness, as they talk about Christ and salvation and redemption, it's not these intellectual propositions that win me over or convert me or change me, but a kind of inevitable and successive current of the truth of his grace that leads to me standing in the water of the River Thames with Bear Grylls, survival expert, and my mate Joe, who I walk the path of recovery with. Joe's known hard times and jail times, beautiful friend of mine. Either side of me, dipping me backwards into the Thames, the sort of coughing and choking that kind of preceded it. In the midst of the personal apocalypse and the white noise chaos that followed, there he is on the cross, and above it, intimate and accessible, all powerful, totally broken and vulnerable. Somehow transubstantiation is precisely what must take place, not in the Eucharist, but in the initial conversion. Somehow all of this is enough for me to say, oh, it's over, it is done, it is finished. And from then on in, a gentle cultivation and edification and, you know, reading the Bible. Like maybe I was a counterculture person, so I felt like I knew what was in the Bible without reading it. I felt like I get what it is. It's like sort of morals and do this and don't do that. I get it. And then like reading it, it's like, what? Whoa! This is like, that's why I understand that people don't like to see anyone post-structurally applying Jung to it, for example, because they're the inference that it isn't absolute, And I know that you lot know so much more about how the composition and the canonization and the Council of Nicaea and all of that. But what smashed me right up was there's a force coming out of this that's simultaneously within me and not within me and is above me and is beyond me. And it all makes sense in the same way that like I talked to Jordan Peterson about this type of stuff a bunch, and he points out the nature of the Old Testament predictions and how unlikely it would be that all those predictions will be fulfilled, and Moses holds up the staff and the serpent and he's held up on all of these kind of sort of poetic and archetypal resonances and rhymes. But what came to me is like, oh my God, this is it. This is the source of my beingness. The thing that I've looked for in LSD and ecstasy, and I mean ecstasy in the sort of bodily sense, the cup runneth over, joy being fulfillment, ecstasy being the bursting of the banks of self, is all here somehow in him and in his blood. And I thought I was too clever for it. But it was too clever for me. And amidst all of that, there's his infinite grace and his infinite compassion sort of alloyed to that power. So it came from absolute brokenness. But more than that, it wasn't like sort of, although there's a desperate, save me, like I'm drowning, I'm going to die out here. There's also something much more powerful, like that when you grab hold of it, the transmission you receive is so sort of ferociously truthful that it annihilated everything that had come before it. All of the paganism, pantheism, individualism, solipsism, narcissism just flooded out like in a new deluge.
How recently was this, Russell?
April the 28th. I was baptized on April the 28th.
So it's all pretty new for you in terms of just like the flood, the deluge.
Yeah, it just happened so fast. It just created a new mental landscape. So much flows out of it. Oh, you can't change yourself. He's going to change you. Why are you trying to change yourself for? It's all going to just happen now. You don't achieve stuff through merit. It all just unfolded like a sort of a glossolalia of mad and incandescent facts poured forth from him relentlessly. The living water flows from the abdomen. The spirit is upon the water. Prima materia is consciousness itself. The pact between Satan and God when it comes to Job, the ongoing Luciferian presence of the false light of post-enlightenment, it all just arrived like some mad new continent.
Wow. Just wow. Hearing Russell's story, especially that part about his child, really gives you something to think about, doesn't it? I knew bits and pieces of his past, his struggles with addiction and fame, but hearing him talk about that moment of reckoning, that turning point, was incredibly moving. A few things really stood out to me. First, the role of suffering. It's so often in those moments of brokenness, when we're stripped bare, that we become open to the possibility of something more. It reminds me of C.S. Lewis's words about suffering being God's megaphone to a deaf world. Russell's experience seems to echo that. He was in a place of deep pain and confusion, and it was in that wilderness that he encountered the living God. Another thing that struck me was his hunger for the Word after his conversion. He talked about wanting to dive into the Bible, to understand it, to connect with it. That thirst for truth, that desire to know God more deeply, is such a powerful testament to the transformative power of faith. It reminds us that conversion isn't just a one-time event, but the beginning of a lifelong journey of learning and growing in Christ. And then there's the sheer improbability of it all. Russell, a man who had everything the world could offer, who had tasted the highs and lows of fame and fortune, found true fulfillment not in any of those things, but in Jesus. He had nothing to gain, and arguably a lot to lose, by embracing Christianity. Yet he did. That kind of radical shift, that complete reorientation of his life speaks volumes. It makes you think about your own life, doesn't it? What are the things you're chasing? Are they leaving you feeling empty and unfulfilled? So many of us are searching for meaning and purpose in things that ultimately can't satisfy. We're looking in all the wrong places. At the Source Incarnate, we believe that true and lasting fulfillment can only be found in a relationship with Jesus Christ. He is the source of all life, all truth, all love. Russell's testimony is a powerful reminder that God's grace is available to all of us, no matter our past, no matter our struggles. It's a story of hope, redemption, and the transformative power of faith. What do you think about Russell's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're looking for more content like this, be sure to subscribe to The Source Incarnate and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on our future videos. We're dedicated to exploring faith, truth, and the transformative power of the gospel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.